I've already spoken about Google Translate, and this video is going to be a small demonstration of why a translator is preferable to an online translation tool, free though it may be. I'm also going to give you a couple of myths about Google Translate and then disprove them. So first, I took some sample sentences in French from 4 different sources: a history book, an economics book, a play and an art catalogue. And I put the sentences in French through Google Translate to see what they came out as in English, and then I translated them myself without looking at Google Translate. So it's a natural translation, I would say, as natural as possible. So first I'll give you the example sentence from the play, which is Ondine by Giraudoux, and this was taken from the 6th scene of the 3rd act. Ainsi, séparés par l'oubli, la mort, les âges, les races, nous nous entendrons bien, nous nous serons fidèles. Google Translate gave, thus, separated by oblivion, death, ages, races, we shall understand each other, we will be faithful. Not that bad when you think about it. My translation was, in this way, separated by oblivion, death, races and ages, we will understand each other, we will be faithful to each other. So something that Google Translate did here was that it kept the French structure, which is standard with Google Translate. It's a very literal way of translation, so it really takes each word and translates each word. So the syntax isn't translated into the other language. In French, for example, accumulations are more are preferred to coordination. So that's why all the nouns are separated by commas. L'oubli, la mort, les âges, les races. In English, we prefer coordination, which was why I put oblivion, death, races, and the ages, which is a more English turn of phrase. I also used a semicolon in between we will understand each other, we will be faithful to each other, as a simple comma isn't really grammatical in that case. The next example is a phrase from the economic book. Fondamentalement, ce que Marx reproche à Sismondi, c'est d'avoir manifesté de plus en plus, au fil de ses publications, la nostalgie d'un monde fantasmé de petites villes, où les élites se rassemblent en académies savantes, comme au XVIIIe siècle. Here, Google Translate's translation is a lot more problematic. So the result is, basically, what Marx reproaches Sismondi for having manifested more and more throughout his publications, the nostalgia of a world fantasized of small towns, where the elites gathered in scholarly academies as the 18th century. Here there was a complex structure and a complex verb, which Google Translate could not cope with. My translation was, in essence, Marx criticised Sismondi's work for betraying an increasing nostalgia for a fantasy world of small towns, where the elites formed learned societies as in the 18th century. So I took the verb reproche à, which Google Translate translates as reproaches Sismondi for, and I decided to translate it by criticised, and I introduced Sismondi's work, which makes a more idiomatic English sentence. I also used betraying instead of showed or manifested, which is also more idiomatic and raises the register of the language. We'll next have a look at the example from the art catalogue, one of my favourite sources of reading. So the French sentence was: Dans l'Angleterre victorienne, le coût de l'Antiquité bat son plein. Google Translate had: In Victorian England, the cult of antiquity is in full swing. There are a couple of problems with this. We can't really say the cult of antiquity in English, nor can we use the present when talking about a past event. While the historical present does exist in French, it doesn't really exist in English. So my translation was: in Victorian England, admiration for antiquity was at its peak. Another change I made, as you can see, was that I did not translate literally by in full swing, as I thought that for a prestigious art catalogue, in full swing was a little colloquial. Google Translate also cannot determine register, which is why you need a human translator. Finally, for the historical textbook, my sentence was: Contrairement à l'industrie lourde, qui doit obéir aux besoins et aux impulsions de l'État central, l'économie rurale répond à des besoins locaux que peuvent définir les communautés. Google Translate translated this as: unlike heavy industry, which must obey the needs and impulses of the central state, the rural economy responds to local needs, which communities can define. Here, response was a literal translation, as well as define. And the also rather literal was obey the needs and impulses, as heavy industry cannot obey anything. My translation was: unlike heavy industry, which must meet the needs and demands of the central state, rural economies satisfy local needs, which can be outlined by the local communities. So the phrasing and choice of words are more idiomatic than Google Translate's version. Also, the phrasing for the relative clause is more natural in my translation, which can be outlined by the local communities rather than which communities can define. I'll now give you a couple of myths revolving around Google Translate. The first is that Google Translate will one day replace human translators. This is a myth because, as I have showed, Google Translate cannot cope with some of the subtleties that human translators are trained to deal with. So register in academic texts, art catalogues, professional publications. There's a certain register that must be respected. And literal translation cannot give you the quality translation that a human translator can produce. Also, human translators give real quality to their translations by offering you quality control, whether it's in the source text or the target text. When I have a translation from a client and I notice that there are mistakes in the original language, so in the French, I'll put comments on and I'll tell my client so that they can change them if they want. For example, if it's an academic publication, an article, that's generally something they're extremely happy about. Also, I can tell them if a sentence structure is slightly clumsy and if there could be something more idiomatic and more easily comprehensive for the reader. And this is because translators have a very critical and analytical approach to the text, and they must have in order to translate it. So quality control is really added value in the translator's work, and it's something that you don't have with Google Translate. Another part of the quality control is fact-checking. So if I will check every name I find in a translation, dates, years of publication, titles of reports, everything that you can check up, all kinds of names that should exist in the real world. And I've often found slight irregularities. Sometimes a date is wrong, a couple of days wrong, or a couple of years wrong if it's a publication year. Names can be misspelled, and names of bodies, for example the United Nations, can have one word wrong, or the acronym can be inversed at different points in the text. So translators have a crucial role to play there as well. The second myth that I will tell you about is that using Google Translate before sending a text to a translator saves time and money. This is a myth because it actually takes a translator a lot longer to try to decipher your original meaning with Google Translate than if you had just sent them the original text. Sometimes sentence structures can become so intricate and involved that it's very difficult to get the original meaning. So a translator who has that kind of tech to translate will actually charge you more than their regular rate, because they'll have to take more time to do the work, and it will be a lot more difficult for them. So that's it for today. Thank you. Bye.